What happens when this person you disrespect holds the power to shatter your world? At New York's JFK Airport, a gate agent drunk on a tiny sliver of authority decided to humiliate a black woman, laughing as he threw her ticket in the trash. He saw her simple clothes, her quiet demeanor, and judged her worthless. What he didn't know what the entire airline was about to learn was that this woman, Dr. Alistair Vance, wasn't just another passenger. She was the silent force who owned 12% of their company, and she was about to call in her investment. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story of reckoning. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 8 was thick with the usual cocktail of hurry and stale Cinnabon. It was a symphony of controlled chaos, the rhythmic beeping of carts, the murmur of a dozen languages, the staccato clacking of roller bags on polished floors. For most, it was a transient space, a necessary purgatory between departure and arrival for Dr. Alistair Vance. It was the final hurdle after a grueling week in London. Alistair wasn't one for flashy entrances. At 42, she had cultivated an aura of quiet intensity that often led people to underestimate her. Today, she was the epitome of understated. She wore a simple, well-made, but unbranded charcoal grey cashmere tracksuit, a practical choice for a transatlantic flight. Her hair was pulled back in a neat, low bun, and her only jewelry was a classic Cartier watch, its face turned discreetly inward. There was no Louis Vuitton luggage, no Gucci tote. Her single carry-on was a scuffed but sturdy Tumi, a veteran of countless trips to Tokyo, Zurich, and Dubai. To the casual observer, she was just another tired traveler, perhaps a teacher or a mid-level manager heading home. This anonymity was a shield she often used. In her world, the world of high-stakes finance and brutal corporate negotiations, being underestimated was a weapon. She was the founder and managing partner of Vance Capital, a boutique private equity firm that had in 7 short years become a silent giant. They didn't chase headlines, they chased value. They didn't invest in fads, they invested in foundations. Alistair's most recent triumph, the reason for her London trip, was orchestrating a complex multi-billion-dollar debt restructuring for a legacy British retailer, a deal that titans at Blackstone and the Carlyle Group had deemed impossible. She had saved 15,000 jobs, and in the process made her investors a fortune. It was exhausting, intricate work, and all she wanted now was to get back to her quiet apartment in Tribeca and sleep for 15 hours. Her flight, American Airlines AA1201 to Los Angeles, was delayed. First by 30 minutes, then by an hour, now by a vague, indefinite technical issue. A collective groan rippled through the crowded gate area, each time the overhead monitor updated. The space was now standing room only, a press of weary bodies and frayed nerves. Presiding over this little fiefdom of frustration was a gate agent named Kyle Peterson. Kyle was in his late 20s, with a haircut that was a little too sharp and a sense of self-importance that was vastly overinflated. He wore his American Airlines uniform like a suit of armor, a tangible symbol of the authority he felt he lacked in every other aspect of his life. He had washed out of flight school, a fact he kept buried deep beneath layers of resentment, and ended up here at the gate, a gatekeeper to the skies he so desperately wanted to command. He saw the passengers not as customers, but as obstacles, a horde of unruly children to be managed, and if necessary, disciplined. He took a certain pleasure in the power dynamics of the gate. He could make a family wait upgrade, a sycophantic frequent flyer, or deny boarding to someone whose attitude he simply didn't like. Today, the delays had made him the focal point of everyone's anger, and it was making him edgy and cruel. He made a show of striding to the podium, grabbing the microphone with a flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please," he announced, his voice dripping with condescension. "As you know, Flight 1001 is delayed. We have no new information at this time. Crowding the desk will not make the plane fix itself faster. Please have a seat." He slammed the microphone back into its cradle. Alistair watched him from her seat against the wall, her eyes narrowed slightly. She had dealt with men like Kyle her entire life. Men who confused a small amount of power with genuine authority. Men who compensated for their own insecurities by belittling others. She'd faced them across boardroom tables in investor meetings, and now apparently at Gate C42. The delay stretched past the 2-hour mark. The air grew staler, the tempers shorter. A young mother with a crying baby was told curtly by Kyle that she couldn't board early to settle her child. An elderly man who asked a simple question about connections was dismissed with a wave of his hand. Kyle was on a power trip, and the palpable misery of the passengers seemed to be fueling him. Alistair's phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert Stallworth, the CEO of American Airlines. Alistair saw the final wire transfer. "You are a miracle worker. The board is ecstatic. That new capital injection shores up our entire Q4 outlook and kills the vulture fund's bid for good. We owe you big time. Let me know when you land in LA. We'll have a car waiting." Alistair smiled faintly. The Vulture Fund was a rival firm that had been attempting a hostile takeover of American Airlines for 6 months. They had been buying up debt, sowing discord among shareholders, and preparing to gut the company for short-term profit. Alistair, seeing a fundamentally sound company with a temporary cash flow problem, had stepped in. Vance Capital had quietly acquired a 12% stake in the airline over the last quarter, becoming the second-largest single shareholder. Then she had personally negotiated a massive credit line from a consortium of international banks, using her reputation as collateral. The deal finalized just this morning had saved the airline. Robert Stallworth's gratitude was genuine. American Airlines and its 130,000 employees had been pulled back from the brink, and Dr. Alistair Vance was the one who had pulled it. She texted back, "Happy to help, Bob. Just glad we could get it done. See you on the West Coast." She put her phone away, the irony not lost on her. Here she was, the anonymous savior of the very company whose employee was currently treating his customers like dirt. Finally, a new announcement crackled over the PA system, this time from a different agent, a woman named Brenda, who seemed perpetually stressed. "We will now begin the boarding process for American Airlines Flight 101 to Los Angeles, starting with our concierge key and first-class passengers." A wave of relief washed over the gate. Alistair stood, stretched her tired muscles, and picked up her Toomey bag. She waited patiently for her group to be called. She held a first-class ticket, a small perk she always allowed herself on long-haul flights. It wasn't about luxury. It was about efficiency and the ability to work or sleep without interruption. When Group 1 was called, she joined the line, her ticket and passport in hand. The line snaked slowly toward the podium, where Kyle Peterson stood scanning tickets with an air of profound boredom. As Alistair reached the front, she handed him her documents. Kyle took them without making eye contact, his attention on his screen. He scanned the ticket. A frown flickered across his face. He scanned it again. An error message beeped softly. He finally looked up, his eyes sweeping over Alistair's cashmere tracksuit with a dismissive glance. His gaze was insolent, judging. He saw her face, her clothes, her lack of designer accessories, and a switch flipped in his brain. "There's a problem with your ticket," he said, his voice flat. "Oh," Alistair replied, her tone even. "I checked in this morning. Everything seemed to be in order." "Well, it's not in order now," Kyle snapped, enjoying the flicker of concern from the people in line behind her. "The system is showing your seat has been released. It's not valid." Alistair kept her composure. This was likely a computer glitch, a byproduct of the delay and gate changes. "I see. Could you perhaps reissue it? Here is my confirmation email." She started to pull out her phone. Kyle held up a hand, stopping her. "Sweetheart, I can't just reissue a ticket. The flight is overbooked. Because of the delay, we had to consolidate. Your seat is gone." He used the word sweetheart like a weapon, a deliberate, condescending jab. The line behind her was growing restless. People were sighing, shifting their weight. "I can assure you, my seat was confirmed," Alistair said, her voice dropping a half octave, becoming colder, more precise. "I am a full-fare, first-class passenger. I would appreciate it if you would check again. Perhaps consult a supervisor." This challenge to his authority was exactly what Kyle craved. It was his chance to make an example of someone. He smirked, a cruel little twist of his lips. "Look," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I don't know what kind of bargain bin site you used to buy this, but it's not valid. The seat is taken. You'll have to go back to the customer service desk and see if they can get you on the 9 p.m. flight. The 9 p.m. flight, p.m. That was in 6 hours. That is unacceptable." Alistair stated, her patience finally evaporating. "I am not going anywhere. My name is Dr. Alistair Vance. I am in seat 2A. Please find your supervisor." The use of her title seemed to amuse him. "Oh, a doctor," he said with a theatrical eye roll. "A doctor of what basket weaving your title doesn't get you a seat that doesn't exist." He was playing to the crowd now. A few people snickered nervously. Others looked down, embarrassed but unwilling to intervene. Then Kyle Peterson did something that tipped the situation from a mere customer service dispute into a flagrant act of aggression. He took her paper ticket, held it up between his thumb and forefinger, and looked her directly in the eye. "This," he said slowly, "is what I think of your ticket." And with a flick of his wrist he tossed it. The small rectangle of cardstock fluttered pathetically, landing in the small overflowing trash bin next to the podium. Then he laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was sharp and clear and utterly contemptuous. It was a laugh that said, "You are nothing. I am in control." The entire gate area fell silent. The restless peeps, the whispers, the crying baby. Everything stopped. All eyes were on Alistair, this quiet black woman in a simple tracksuit who had just been publicly humiliated. Kyle crossed his arms, a triumphant smirk on his face, waiting for the tears or the shouting match he assumed would follow. He expected her to make a scene, to be dragged away by security, to become just another airport horror story. He was wrong. Alistair did not cry. She did not scream. She did not even flinch. A terrifying calm settled over her features. The weariness in her eyes was replaced by a look of cold, diamond-hard fury. It was a look that had made hardened CEOs and billionaire financiers fold during negotiations. She held Kyle's gaze for a long, silent moment. The air crackled. Then she slowly, deliberately reached into her Tumi bag and pulled out her phone. She didn't look for a confirmation email. She tapped a single name in her favorites list. As the phone began to ring, she turned her gaze from Kyle to his supervisor Brenda, who had been watching the entire exchange from a few feet away, deliberately ignoring it. "You might want to pay attention to this," Alistair said, her voice quiet, but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. The phone clicked on the second ring. Alistair put it on speakerphone for the whole world to hear. A panicked, deferential voice filled the sudden silence of the gate. "Alistair, is everything okay? I saw you hadn't boarded. I was just about to call the station manager. Don't tell me there's an issue." It was the voice of Robert Stallworth, the CEO of American Airlines. Kyle Peterson's smirk vanished. His face went pale, the color draining from it as if a plug had been pulled. The blood roared in his ears. His triumphant posture collapsed, his shoulders slumping as a horrifying, sickening realization began to dawn on him. This was not a teacher. This was not a mid-level manager. This was someone who had the CEO on speed dial. The sound of Robert Stallworth's voice, amplified by the phone's speaker, sliced through the terminal's ambient noise. It was a voice accustomed to command, now laced with genuine concern. For the passengers still in line, it was a moment of pure, unadulterated drama. For Kyle Peterson and his supervisor, Brenda, it was the sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted into place. "Bob," Alistair said, her own voice still unnervingly calm. "I seem to be having a bit of a travel issue here at JFK Gate C42. Kyle stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. His mind, which seconds ago had been soaring on a cloud of petty tyranny, was now plummeting back to earth at a terminal velocity. He stared at Alistair, really seeing her for the first time. The simple tracksuit now looked less like a budget choice and more like a statement of someone so confident they had nothing to prove. The classic watch suddenly seemed impossibly expensive. The calm she exuded was not weakness. It was power held in reserve. Brenda, the supervisor, finally jolted into action. Her face, a mask of practiced indifference moments before, was now a canvas of sheer panic. She scurried to the podium, her sensible shoes squeaking in protest. "Ma'am, I'm sure there's just been a misunderstanding," she began, her voice a high-pitched squeak. "Kyle, what is going on here?" She shot him a look of pure venom, a silent scream of, "What did you do?" Kyle couldn't form words. He just pointed a trembling finger at Alistair's phone as if it were a venomous snake. On the phone, Bob Stallworth's voice sharpened. "An issue." "What kind of issue? Is the station manager there? Put him on." "That won't be necessary just yet." "Bob?" Alistair said, her eyes locked on Kyle. "I'm more interested in a personnel issue. I've just been informed by your gate agent that my first-class seat 2A has been released because the flight is overbooked. He referred to me as sweetheart, questioned my intelligence, and for a grand finale threw my boarding pass into the trash." There was a sharp intake of breath from Stallworth on the other end of the line. A dead silence followed, lasting for what felt like an eternity. When he spoke again, the concern was gone, replaced by an icy fury that could freeze hell over. "He did what—" "He laughed too," Alistair added, as a matter of fact. "It was quite a performance." "What is his name?" Stallworth demanded. The question was not a request. It was a command that brooked no argument. Brenda, desperate to control the spiraling disaster, grabbed the microphone. "Sir, this is the gate supervisor, Brenda Miller. I can handle this." "I am not speaking to you." Stallworth cut her off brutally. "I'm speaking to Dr. Vance. I want the name of the agent who threw her ticket away." Alistair looked at Kyle's name tag. "His name is Kyle Peterson," she said clearly into the phone. She then shifted her gaze to the supervisor. And his direct supervisor, a Miss Brenda Miller, stood by and watched the entire exchange. A low groan of despair escaped Brenda's lips. She was no longer just a bystander. She was an accomplice named and identified to the chief executive officer of the entire airline. "Stay right where you are, Alistair. Do not move," Stallworth commanded. "I'm calling the chief of airport operations at JFK directly. Someone will be there in 2 minutes." The line went dead. Alistair lowered the phone. The silence it left behind more deafening than the call itself. The tableau was frozen. The passengers in line were silent, their expressions a mixture of shock and vicarious satisfaction. Kyle looked as if he was about to be physically sick. His face was slick with sweat, his sharp uniform now looking like a ridiculous costume. Brenda was wringing her hands, her eyes darting between Alistair and the jet bridge, as if wishing the ground would swallow her whole. I can fix this," Kyle stammered, his voice a pathetic croak. He lunged for the trash can, his hands shaking as he began to rummage through discarded coffee cups and crumpled napkins to retrieve the ticket he had so theatrically thrown away. It was a humiliating, desperate act, and it only magnified his earlier arrogance. He found the slightly soiled boarding pass and held it out to her, his hand trembling. "Here, ma'am. Dr. Vance. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. The system, it's buggy. I was stressed." Alistair looked from the pathetic retrieved ticket to his face. She gave a slow, deliberate shake of her head. "No," she said. "The time for that has passed. You didn't make a mistake, Mr. Peterson. You made a choice. You chose to be cruel because you thought I was powerless. You judged me on my appearance and my race, and you decided I was not worthy of your basic respect." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing his flimsy excuses. True to Stallworth's word, less than 2 minutes later, a man in a tailored suit came rushing down the concourse, flanked by 2 uniformed Port Authority officers. He was panting slightly, his face flushed. This was David Chen, the airline's head of New York operations, a man who oversaw thousands of employees and a multi-billion-dollar hub. And right now, he looked like he'd just been summoned by God himself. "Dr. Vance?" he asked, his eyes scanning the scene and immediately locking on to Alistair, the calm center of the hurricane. "I'm David Chen. Mr. Stallworth called me. I am so sorry for whatever has occurred here. Please come with me." He gestured toward the plush interior of the Admiral's Club lounge. "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Alistair said, but she didn't move. She pointed a finger at Kyle and Brenda. "Before I go anywhere, I want them removed from this gate. They will not be boarding another passenger for this flight. They will not be representing this airline." Chen didn't hesitate. He turned to the 2 disgraced employees. "You heard her. Get your things. Go to my office. Now!" His voice was devoid of any warmth. It was the voice of a man carrying out an execution. Kyle looked like he was about to collapse. "But the flight is no longer your concern," Chen snapped. "Your careers might not be your concern for much longer either. Go." Defeated, humiliated in front of the very crowd he had tried to dominate. Kyle Peterson turned. Brenda, weeping openly, now followed him. As they walked away, a few passengers broke into spontaneous, quiet applause. It was a small, cathartic release for everyone who had witnessed the ugly display. Chen turned back to Alistair, his expression deeply apologetic. "Dr. Vance again, on behalf of the entire airline, I cannot apologize enough. Please, let's get you away from this." Alistair finally nodded. But as she started to walk with him, she stopped and turned back to the line of waiting passengers. "For those of you who were delayed," she announced, her voice carrying easily, "I have been assured by Mr. Chen that complimentary beverage service will be available for the entire cabin, and every passenger on this flight will receive 10,000 advantage miles for their trouble." Chen blinked momentarily, surprised that she was making operational promises on his behalf, but he recovered instantly, nodding vigorously. "Yes, of course, absolutely. My staff will see to it." The passengers, who had gone from annoyed to entertained to now being rewarded, murmured their appreciation. Alistair had not only asserted her power, but she had also shared its benefits. As Chen escorted her away from the gate, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Stallworth. Chen's eyes widened as he read it. He looked at Dr. Alistair Vance with a new profound level of awe and terror. The text was simple and chilling. "David, you need to understand who you are talking to. Dr. Vance isn't just a VIP. Vance Capital closed a deal this morning that gave them a 12% equity stake in this company. She is our second largest shareholder. Treat her like the Queen of England. No, treat her better." Chen swallowed hard. This wasn't just a PR crisis. This was a shareholder revolt embodied in one woman who had just been treated like garbage by his own staff. The agent hadn't just thrown away a ticket. He had thrown a grenade into the corporate headquarters of American Airlines, and it had just exploded. The John F. Kennedy Admirals Club flagship lounge was a world engineered to insulate its occupants from the very chaos they had just traversed. The lighting was a soft, forgiving gold. The air was scented with something subtly expensive, a mix of polished wood and fresh orchids. The ambient sound was a carefully curated hush, the whisper of turning pages, the discreet murmur of conversation, the gentle rhythmic clink of heavy cutlery on fine china. It was a sanctuary of privilege, a place where the stress of travel was meant to dissolve in a glass of complimentary Bollinger. But for David Chen, the airline's head of New York operations, the lounge felt like a decompression chamber on the verge of catastrophic failure. The serene environment was a bizarre counterpoint to the raging inferno in his mind and on his phone. He had guided Dr. Alistair Vance to the most secluded corner, a small alcove with 2 plush leather armchairs overlooking the distant rain-slicked tarmac. He felt less like a host and more like a zookeeper trying to soothe a panther he had accidentally provoked. Alistair sat with a posture of unnerving stillness. She had declined the champagne, the wine, the artisanal snacks. Her only request had been for a black coffee, which now sat untouched on the small marble table between them. Her weariness from the London trip had been burned away, replaced by an incandescent, focused energy. Her eyes, dark and analytical, weren't looking at Chen, but through him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, as if she were scanning a horizon only she could see. She was no longer a passenger. She was a strategist, surveying a new and unexpected battlefield. Chen's phone vibrated against his ribs with the ferocity of a trapped hornet. A glance at the screen revealed a cascade of notifications from the executive team at the corporate headquarters in Fort Worth. From Jessica Ray, Chief Communications Officer. Subject: Urgent, Media Crisis, JFK Body. David. What the hell is happening? The WSJ is calling. Reuters is calling. Someone from the gate has leaked. I need a statement. Yesterday, from Paul Morris, General Counsel. Subject: Potential litigation. Incident C42. Body. David, do not speak to anyone. Do not admit fault. We have a potential D&O liability issue here. Stand by for my call. From Robert Stallworth, CEO. Body call me. Now. Chen felt a cold sweat prickle his hairline. He had spent 15 years clawing his way up the corporate ladder at American Airlines. He started as a baggage handler in Chicago, worked his way through operations management, and had finally landed this coveted high-pressure role overseeing the entire New York hub. He was good at his job. He could manage logistics, handle union disputes, and navigate the operational nightmare of a blizzard. But this was different. This wasn't a logistical problem. It was an existential one. One of his gate agents, a bitter young man drunk on a thimbleful of power, hadn't just insulted a customer. He had lit a match and tossed it into the fuel tank of the entire corporation. Taking a deep, unsteadying breath, Chen excused himself with a stammered apology. He walked to the far side of the lounge near a window, his back to Alistair, and jabbed the call button for his CEO. Stallworth picked up before the first ring finished. There was no greeting. "Report," the CEO barked. His voice, usually a calm baritone, was strained and sharp, like a wire pulled too tight. "She's with me now, Bob," Chen said, his voice low. "In the flagship lounge. She's calm. Very calm." He said the word calm, as if describing a deeply worrying medical symptom. "Calm. Don't give me calm, David. That's worse than screaming." Stallworth's voice was a torrent of controlled panic. "Jessica says this is already leaking. The video is probably minutes away from going viral. The board is lighting up my phone like a Christmas tree. Hank Weatherby is demanding someone be fired, drawn, and quartered. Our stock is already sinking in, after-hours trading, based on whispers alone. This is a fame alarm fire." He paused, taking a ragged breath. "Listen to me, David. This is the most important conversation of your career. An apology is not going to cut it. A travel voucher would be an insult. We have offended the one person who holds the financial health of this company in her hands. The woman who just saved us from being carved up and sold for parts. This is not customer service. This is shareholder relations at its most critical. So you are going to go back to that table and you are going to ask her one simple question. What does she want? Not what she'll accept to make this go away. Not what she thinks is fair. I need you to find out what Dr. Alistair Vance wants. Her answer will dictate whether we spend the next quarter recovering or the next 5 years in ruin. Do you understand the stakes?" "Yes, sir," Chen said, his throat tight. "Crystal clear." He hung up the phone, his hand slick with sweat. He took a moment to compose himself, smoothing his tie and squaring his shoulders. Feeling like a diplomat being sent to negotiate terms of surrender, he walked back to the table where Alistair sat an island of tranquility in his personal hurricane. He cleared his throat. "Dr. Vance," he began, his voice more formal, more deferential than before. "I have just spoken with Mr. Stallworth. He and the entire executive board, who are convening as we speak, wish to convey their most profound and unreserved apologies for the disgraceful treatment you received today." Alistair finally shifted her gaze to meet his. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, accepting the apology as a required formality, but attaching no real weight to it. Chen pressed on, knowing this was the critical moment. "He has empowered me to ask you on behalf of the board what you want. He was very specific that I should not ask what you would accept, but what you truly desire as a resolution to this." Alistair let the question hang in the air for a long moment. She picked up her coffee cup, cradled it in her hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. It was a deliberate, thoughtful gesture. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but it had the density of forged steel. "What I want, Mr. Chen," she began, setting the cup down with a soft, definitive click, "is for this airline to understand the difference between an asset and a liability. Your employee, Mr. Peterson, in his ignorance, saw me as a liability, a problem to be dismissed. In reality, I represent a significant asset, a fact he was tragically unaware of. His behavior, however, wasn't just a personal failing. It was a corporate failing. It revealed a deep systemic rot in your company's culture. A culture that permits its frontline ambassadors to believe that humiliating a customer is an acceptable, even amusing exercise of their authority." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "You don't fix a rot like that by firing one person and hoping the story goes away. You fix it by rebuilding the foundation. So to answer your question, what I want is a new foundation." She held up a single, elegant finger. "First, I want a full, unsparing, and completely independent investigation into the hiring, training, and complaint resolution processes for your entire JFK ground operation, with a view to rolling out the findings company-wide. And when I say independent, I do not mean a firm you have on retainer. I want a top-tier DII consultancy, Korn Ferry, perhaps, or McKinsey's inclusion division, to conduct it. They will have unfettered access to all records, including all settled, dismissed, and active complaints filed in the last 5 years. An internal review will only seek to protect itself. I want the truth, however ugly it may be." Chen was already typing furiously into the notes app on his phone, his fingers flying to keep up. "Second," she continued, raising another finger, "accountability. This cannot be a faceless corporate apology. It requires a visible and meaningful consequence. Mr. Peterson must be terminated for cause effective immediately. His record must explicitly state gross misconduct and discriminatory behavior, ensuring he understands that his actions have permanent consequences. For Ms. Miller, whose failure was one of leadership termination is not the answer, re-education is. She will be demoted to a non-managerial customer-facing role. She will be reassigned to your station in Fairbanks, Alaska, for a minimum of 2 years. She needs to be on the front lines in the most challenging conditions to learn what true service and responsibility entail. It's not a punishment. It's a pedagogy. Third, her voice grew harder. This discussion is not over. A phone call is insufficient. I will be attending your emergency board meeting. Cancel my flight to Los Angeles. You will arrange for a corporate jet to take me to Dallas-Fort Worth tonight. I will be there in person tomorrow morning. This issue is now a matter of corporate governance, and as a 12% equity holder, I will exercise my right to address the board directly. They need to see the person their company chose to discard. The demand for the jet wasn't about luxury. It was a power move, a clear signal that she was now operating on their level, using their resources to hold them to account. And fourth, she said, delivering the coup de grace, this cannot end with me. This must be a catalyst for permanent institutional change. I am instructing my team at Vance Capital to draft a formal shareholder proposal for the next annual meeting. We will call it the American Airlines Equity and Dignity Initiative. This initiative will mandate a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of customer-facing training protocols, replacing your current modules with a new curriculum built around de-escalation, implicit bias, and cultural competency. Furthermore, it will establish a new powerfully independent office of the passenger advocate, with the authority to investigate complaints and award compensation bypassing the traditional customer service structure. This office's findings will be presented to the board quarterly, and its budget, Mr. Chen, will be tied directly to executive performance. For every percentage point your executive team fails to meet in new customer satisfaction and bias incident reduction metrics, a corresponding percentage of their annual cash bonus will be reallocated to fund this office. I want to ensure that the interests of the passengers are financially aligned with the interests of the C-suite. She sat back, her case made. It was not a list of demands from an angry customer. It was a detailed, non-negotiable structural reformation of a Fortune 500 company, delivered with the precision of a hostile takeover bid. David Chen stared at his phone at the 4 bullet points he had just typed. It was the most terrifying and brilliant corporate strategy he had ever witnessed. She hadn't just asked for a head on a platter. She had demanded they build a whole new, better platter. I will relay this to Mr. Stallworth immediately, he stammered, standing on wobbly legs. He walked away again, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He relayed the 4 points to the CEO, his voice a hushed, awed monotone. He read each point verbatim from his notes. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Chen could picture the scene in Fort Worth, Stallworth, on the speakerphone, the board members looking at each other in stunned silence. Finally, Stallworth's voice came back, devoid of panic, replaced by a grim sense of resolution. "It's done," he said. "Tell her yes. To everything. The jet will be ready in 90 minutes. The Omni in Dallas is being booked. Tell her thank you." Chen hung up, marveling at the word, "thank you." He returned to Alistair. "Dr. Vance, your terms are accepted. Unconditionally. A Gulfstream is being fueled for you at the private aviation terminal. A car is waiting downstairs." Alistair simply nodded. For the first time, she picked up her coffee and took a slow, deliberate sip. She stood her quiet composure, a stark contrast to the corporate chaos she had unleashed. As she picked up her simple Tumi bag to leave, her eyes drifted to a large television screen mounted on the lounge wall. It was tuned to NBC, and the anchor was speaking with a grave expression. The chyron at the bottom of the screen told the story in stark red letters. American Airlines, AL, plummets 9% in after-hours trading amid rumors of major shareholder dispute and viral video of customer mistreatment. Chen saw it too, and a shiver went down his spine. He was looking at a market-moving event, but Alistair's expression was unreadable. She wasn't watching the news with satisfaction or anger. She was watching it with the detached analysis of a chess master who has just placed her opponent in checkmate, already thinking 3 moves ahead to how she would rebuild the board. The personal insult was over. The corporate restructuring had just begun. The next 48 hours moved at the speed of a corporate crisis. For Alistair Vance, it was a whirlwind of motion, the silent, sleek comfort of the Gulfstream G650, whisking her to Texas, the respectful, almost fearful deference of every employee she encountered, the immediate setup of a war room at the Omni Hotel in Dallas. For Kyle Peterson, it was 48 hours of free fall, a terrifying descent into a future he had single-handedly destroyed. The termination came before he even left David Chen's office at JFK. It was delivered not by Chen, but via a cold, impersonal email from HR. The subject line was stark: notice of immediate termination for cause. The body of the email was brief and brutal, citing gross misconduct, violation of company ethics policies, and endangerment of the company's brand and shareholder value. His employee ID was deactivated remotely. His access to the building was revoked. 2 security guards escorted him and Brenda, who had received a similar, though slightly less severe notice of demotion and mandatory relocation to the employee exit. They were handed their personal effects in a cardboard box. As Kyle stepped out into the humid Queen's air, no longer an employee, no longer a gatekeeper, just a man in a useless uniform holding a box. The first wave of true panic hit him. This wasn't just losing a job. This was being publicly branded. He went home to his small apartment in Astoria, the one he constantly complained about, and turned on his computer. He wanted to rage, to vent, to find some corner of the internet that would validate his victimhood. Instead, he found his own face. A passenger from the line, a tech blogger named Marcus Thorne, who had been flying to a conference in LA, had filmed the entire incident on his phone. Not just the ticket toss, but Kyle's condescending remarks, Alistair's calm response, the arrival of David Chen. Everything. He had written a blog post titled, "I watched American Airlines implode" at Gate C42, and it was a masterclass in karma. The post had gone viral. The video was everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. It had been picked up by major news outlets. The Daily Mail had a splashy headline, "Gate Agent Kyle sacks himself after humiliating secret shareholder." Forbes ran a more sober piece, "The High Cost of Poor Customer Service: How One Incident Could Cost American Airlines Millions." Kyle's name, Kyle Peterson, was now public knowledge. His face was a meme for entitled racist service employees. He was Gate Agent Kyle, the newest villain in the internet's daily drama. His social media profiles were inundated with hateful messages. People found his LinkedIn profile and spammed his connections. His dream of being a pilot. That was the first and most painful casualty. He had applications pending with several regional airlines, hoping to finally get into a cockpit. Within hours, he received polite, formal emails from SkyWest Republic Airways and Envoy Air. "Thank you for your interest, but we have decided to pursue other candidates at this time." The aviation industry is a small, tight-knit world. A viral video of you abusing a passenger who also happens to be a major investor in one of the world's largest airlines, is a career death sentence. No airline would ever trust him with the responsibility of a multi-million-dollar aircraft and the lives of its passengers. He was blacklisted. His lifelong dream, the one that had fueled his bitterness and resentment, was now permanently and irrevocably gone. His personal life crumbled next. His girlfriend, a flight attendant for Delta, saw the video and called him horrified. "Is that you, Kyle? Is that really you?" she had asked, her voice trembling with disgust. He tried to explain, to downplay it, but the evidence was undeniable. She broke up with him over the phone, telling him she couldn't be with someone so full of hate. His landlord saw the news report. The next day there was a notice on his door. His lease would not be renewed. The landlord didn't want the notoriety or the potential trouble. Within 2 days, Kyle Peterson had lost his job, his career prospects, his girlfriend, and his apartment. He was a pariah. The power he had so enjoyed wielding at the gate had been a fleeting illusion. The consequences were devastatingly real. He had tossed a single paper ticket into the trash, and in return the universe had tossed his entire life in the garbage. Brenda Miller's fate was a different kind of professional death. She wasn't fired, which in a way was crueler. Her demotion was immediate. She was stripped of her supervisor title, and her salary was slashed by 40%. Her reassignment was, as Alistair had suggested, to the most undesirable location in the American Airlines network, the regional airport in Fairbanks, Alaska. She would be working the pre-dawn shift de-icing planes and handling baggage in sub-zero temperatures. It was a humiliating exile, a constant reminder of her failure to act to do the right thing. Every shivering morning, for the foreseeable future, would be her punishment. Back in Dallas, the American Airlines boardroom felt like a tomb. The long polished mahogany table reflected the grim faces of the board members, some present in person, others patched in via a giant video screen. Robert Stallworth stood at the head of the table looking haggard. The company's stock had dropped 8% since the market opened, wiping out over $900 million in shareholder value. The PR department was fielding thousands of calls. Corporate sponsors were expressing concern. The door opened and Alistair Vance walked in. She was no longer in a tracksuit. She wore a sharp, impeccably tailored Alexander McQueen power suit, the kind of armor one wears for battle. She carried a leather portfolio and exuded an aura of absolute control. The board members, men and women who controlled billions of dollars, sat up straighter. This was the woman who owned 12% of their company. This was the woman they had allowed to be humiliated. "Dr. Vance," Stallworth said, his voice heavy with contrition. "Welcome. And again, my apologies don't seem adequate, but you have them." Alistair nodded curtly and took a seat Stallworth had indicated directly to his right. "Thank you, Bob. Apologies are noted," she said, her voice crisp. "But I am not here for apologies. I am here to discuss the future. Your stock is hemorrhaging value. Your brand is being tarnished, and you have a systemic cultural problem that has just been laid bare for the world to see. The question before this board is simple. What are you going to do about it?" An older board member, a gruff former oil tycoon named Hank Weatherby, cleared his throat. "Now hold on. We've fired the agent. We've punished the supervisor. The market is overreacting. This will blow over." Alistair turned her cool gaze on him. "Mr. Weatherby, with all due respect, that is the kind of thinking that leads to a $900 million loss in a single trading day. This is not a passing storm. This is climate change. The world is different now. People have a voice. The customer you serve is no longer a silent wallet. They are a network. They are a broadcaster. What happened to me was not an anomaly. It was a symptom. Your company has a cancer of indifference, and in some cases outright contempt for its customers. And I, as one of your largest investors, am telling you that we are going to cure it." She opened her portfolio. "To that end, I have a proposal. The Equity and Dignity Initiative I mentioned to Mr. Chen." For the next hour, she laid out her plan. She didn't just talk about vague concepts like better training. She presented a detailed, actionable plan. She proposed using a leading DEI diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm, mentioning the real-life firm Korn Ferry by name, to conduct a top-to-bottom audit. She outlined a new customer bill of rights that would be posted at every gate and on every ticket confirmation. It would include clear, simple language about the right to be treated with dignity regardless of race appearance or class of ticket. She detailed the creation of the Independent Passenger Advocacy Office with a direct line to the board, funded by a 1% levy on executive bonuses if complaint metrics weren't met. She suggested a partnership with historically black colleges and universities' HBCUs to create new pipelines for hiring into management and corporate roles, changing the very face of the company from the inside out. It was bold, it was aggressive, it was expensive, and it was brilliant. As she finished, the room was silent. She had taken a moment of ugly personal racism and transformed it into a multi-pronged strategy for corporate renewal. She had shown them that their greatest liability could be transformed into their greatest asset. Robert Stallworth looked around the table at the faces on the screen. He saw the initial skepticism replaced by a dawning understanding and then respect. All those in favor of tasking Dr. Vance with leading a committee to immediately implement the Equity and Dignity Initiative with a preliminary budget of $50 million say aye. A chorus of ayes filled the room. It was unanimous. Even Hank Weatherby, the old tycoon, nodded his assent. He knew a winning play when he saw one. Alistair Vance had walked into JFK as a tired passenger. She had been treated as less than human. She was now walking out of the American Airlines boardroom as the most powerful and influential voice in the company, poised to enact the most significant cultural change in its history. The karma that had crushed Kyle Peterson was not just about punishment. It was about rebalancing the scales. And for Dr. Alistair Vance, that meant building something better from the wreckage. This wasn't just a victory for one woman. It was a watershed moment that forced a corporate giant to confront the ugliness hiding in plain sight. Dr. Alistair Vance didn't just get an apology. She took a seat at the head of the table and demanded systemic change. She proved that true power isn't about loud displays of authority, but in the quiet, unyielding resolve to turn injustice into a force for good. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that dignity is not negotiable, and that underestimating someone can have consequences you never see coming. What do you think? Was the karma too harsh or a fitting end to the story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life dramas where karma delivers the final unforgettable twist.